Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Let's, without any further ado, welcome the terrific author, broadcaster, and all-around good guy, and somebody hugely responsible, along with David, as I said before, but along with David, hugely responsible for alerting me to what's really going on in the world. Let's say a big hello all the way from Texas to our great friend and colleague, the one and only Jim Marrs. How you doing, my friend?
Howdy, Richard. I'm doing pretty good today.
You're not doing too bad today. You might not be doing so well tomorrow, but or
the months after.
Or the months afterwards, right? You know, it's been a great show tonight. John Rappaport, whom you know very well, was on the program in the first hour.
I have a lot of respect. I have a lot of respect for John,
and that goes both ways, Jim. Believe you me, I was speaking to John before coming on air today, and he was thrilled that he said, "What a great guy Jim is," and he said, "You having Jim coming on after me? I'll be interested in what Jim has to say." We were talking about obviously the FBI decision. Can I ask you, Jim, why did James Comey reopen this whole email inquiry into Clinton if it was going to end up with this frankly ludicrous, well, we've looked through the 650,000 emails and we're not going to take it any further? Why did they decide to reopen it, do you think?
Because he loves his family.
Right.
Yeah. Because the people we're dealing with, and it's not just Clinton, although there's more than 100 dead bodies in the wake of the Clinton political career, okay, but it's not just them. It's the Wall Street bankers, the international bankers that she represents. It's the, for want of a better expression, the New World Order, this clique of uber rich people who are trying to run the world, and they will stop at nothing, including murder. They'll murder the head of the FBI. They probably murdered J. Edgar Hoover. Nobody remembers, but, they found him dead in his home. They rolled him up in a blanket, put him in a cab, hauled him away. And there was no autopsy. There was no nothing. We don't know what happened. Just like at the first of the year when Judge Scalia, okay, the one conservative Constitution supporting member of the Supreme Court, goes to a secret society down in Texas, famous for playing with little boys, and suddenly dies in his sleep, and there was a pillow on his face, but no, it wasn't on his face. It was up a little bit. It kind of slid down, and no, they didn't do an autopsy, and no, they didn't turn his body back over to his family, and it's just a tragic accident. Move on, folks. Nothing here to see. I mean, they will kill, they murder, and they not only will kill you, they'll kill your whole family and your dog. And that's enough to make most people stop and reconsider what they're doing. And obviously, Comey, had to back up track once again, even though in his original announcement back last summer, he said that, yes, technically she had violated 47 laws, but, she didn't really mean to. Okay, so, hey, you guys over in Britain, when the Bobby stops you for jaywalking or whatever, spitting on the sidewalk, tell him, well, gee, officer, I may have done that, but I didn't mean to, and I'm sure he'll let you off.
At the very least, we mentioned in the previous hour, whatever about her going to prison for it, and I know there are a lot of people who feel that very strongly that she should do some time for that gross misconduct. I mean, it's got very serious implications, of course, for national security. Not to mention, she was letting friends and family and colleagues know about secret conversations and private conversations with other heads of state, and those conversations might have had, an influence on the financial markets and stuff like that. And of course, Hillary was just giving people the information. So I would say, yes, she should go to jail. But even if she didn't go to jail, she's got no business standing for the highest office in the country, Jim.
Absolutely none. And let's compare the candidates, okay? Because I don't have a whole lot of really good, glowing things to say about Donald Trump. I think he's bigoted. I think he's boorish. But then again, on the other hand, you have to consider that he hasn't had 30 years of schooling and coaching and conditioning of how to stand up in front of people and smile real engagingly while you lie in their face and read the teleprompter and stick to prearranged scripts. And of course, it's now been pretty well demonstrated that in the debates, the Democrats were slipped the questions in advance, which had her plenty of time to prepare. And of course, Trump, who is not skilled in the public speaking, he just had to try to wing it, okay? But then backing off a little bit, on Trump's side, we have a lot of allegations and a lot of insinuendos, okay? For example, here's what really kills me, is that 11 years ago in a bus with a bunch of guys, somebody flipped the switch and he was recorded, okay? And in there, they're talking about women. And Trump, at the beginning of it, says they mentioned some woman. And he said, yeah, I tried to move on her. He says, but I was unsuccessful. He says, so I ended up taking her shopping for furniture. Boy, now there's a woman hater, right? Boy, he takes her shopping for furniture. All right, now how bad is that? But then later on, when they're talking in generalities and they're talking about the perks of being rich and famous, he says, yeah, that's really great being rich and famous. He said, because you can kiss all the women and maybe even grope their pussycat, except he left out cat. Okay. Right. All right. So, and from that point on now, we are hearing that he gropes women. He never said that. He never said he did that. He never said he advocated that. He just said, yeah, you can do that if you're rich and famous. Okay, that's all he said. And they built that into a whole thing, a totally twisted, misinterpreted, out of context lie. So there's really, and then now all of a sudden we've got women coming forward who I'm sure will get paid handsomely by the Clinton campaign. 2 weeks before the election, all of a sudden they pop up and say, well, he offered me to go up to his room and he put his hand on my shoulder. And the one I love is the ones that said, well, I was in a beauty pageant, 30 years ago, and he came through the dressing room and, we were all dressing. Hey, wait a minute. He was the manager of those exhibits and those beauty contests. Why wouldn't he be walking through the showing room and the dressing room and anywhere else he wanted to go? But at the time, back then, nobody filed a sex suit on him. Nobody said, oh, he touched me or he did something. It's all innuendo and it's all phony as hell from what I can tell. I haven't seen anything that proves up anything, just a bunch of allegations just to raise smoke here at the end of the campaign. Now, let's look at Hillary. There are 3 living women today who said Bill Clinton raped me, bloodied me, and raped me. And Hillary abetted it. She said, don't talk, and threatened us. Now, I ask you, which one is the more serious of the charges? And yet it seems to just go right over the heads of the media pundits that are owned and controlled by the same New World Order controllers that control Hillary. Richie, I think Donald Trump pretty well summed it up in Florida in one of his speeches when he said, our campaign, meaning his campaign, is an existential threat to the establishment. And he was right. And that's why the establishment is pulling out all stops to try to stop him. They're putting out phony polls. They're telling everybody now on the major networks that they own and control, well, Hillary's way ahead. Hillary's going to win. Well, you tell everybody that, and maybe it'll be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't think so, because I think too many people are now aware of how corrupt and biased the mainstream media is, and because the statistics show that their listenership is dwindling every day because nobody believes them anymore.
Can I jump in there? I'm not going to rehash our debate about who Trump is that we had the last time. It was a terrific debate we had last time. I'm not going to rehash that because I want to talk a little bit about previous presidents and I want to talk a bit about JFK as well. But let me ask you this about Trump. Is a guy like Donald Trump, is he not just a tad naive? Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Now, he obviously came up in the 80s when some of these bankers that you wrote about so brilliantly in $1 Trillion Conspiracy, which, for me, one of the greatest books I ever read on how the world operates financially. Wonderful book, Jim. You know that. You sent me that book in Spain years ago. Marvellous read. Now, Trump he sucked at the teeth of these banksters and he grew up and did very well out of them. I think you're right, and I think others are right that this guy's a very strong-minded. He's a bit of a maverick character, a bit of a loner. Not so much a bit of a loner. I can concede that he's maybe not as embedded in the establishment as maybe others have been. But is he not naive, Jim? He knows who these people are. Donald Trump knows damn well who pulls the strings. How could he possibly be surprised that the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg cartel have decided or decreed that Hillary is going to be our next woman for the next 4 years, and we're going to pull out all the stops, and we own the media anyway? Why is he so surprised by that, number one? And here's the question that some Trump supporters won't like. Why is he not talking more about it, Jim? Because just standing there and saying, oh, it's rigged, why is Trump not naming names?
Well, number one, I think, yes, to a certain degree, he is naive. And you start off mentioning John F. Kennedy. Let's look at John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy, he was messing around with Marilyn Monroe and Judith Exner and among numerous others, okay? And that didn't slow him down from being a damn good president. He was trying to do things in the best interest of the people of the United States, and that's what got him shot in the head. Okay. Now, what I see is that Trump, I think he early on, he had support from the bankers and from the, although he funded early on, he funded his campaign mostly on his own. And then, but then also he had favoritism in the media. Media was giving him all this free publicity and really pushing him. And I think what happened is that the New World Order, the Rothschild banking cartel, decided that, yeah, we'll let old Donald run. And, that way, number one, everybody that stands up to support him, we've got our opposition identified. Number two, when it comes to it, we can destroy him through the media, which they now are trying to do, okay? But they said, then we'll let him self-destruct. But I think that what happened is that Donald Trump had a little epiphany, kind of like Paul on the road to Damascus.
Yeah, to Damascus, yeah.
And he suddenly said, this looks like it could be real. Looks like I might actually get to be president. And as he said in a speech in the Midwest, he said, well, I'm a New Yorker, and I've always thought like a New Yorker. He said, but since I started this campaign, I come out here and I see all the people out here in America, and I said, these are real people, and these are people with real problems, and they need somebody to speak for them, So I think he actually turned and decided maybe I can be president, just like John F. Kennedy thought, well, I'm president, I'll do something, And that's why all of a sudden everything turned against him. Media turned against him. Now he's a groper of women. And now you got, at the last minute, people showing up saying, oh, well, he did something to me 30 years ago. I can't prove it, but it happened, and now they're all after him. And now let me tell you, here's the worst part of it, Richie. If by some chance we can stop a fraudulent election, and he does win the presidency, they're going to pull the plug on the economy, and they're going to blame it on him.
Now, let me ask you this then. Assuming all this is right, and you know much more about this guy than I do, because you've looked at him a lot harder than I have. Assuming that, and I think I can definitely agree with aspects of this. It's the same with Jeremy Corbyn over here, and the same with Sanders. I think, they have their principles and they have their beliefs. But assuming that all of this is right, Trump must know, Jim. He must know what and who the hidden hand behind everything is. He must know this. Because if he doesn't know, I can't buy for a minute that this guy doesn't really know who really pulls the strings, that he doesn't know about the central banks, that he doesn't know about the Federal Reserve cartel and the families that we mentioned already, and Zionism. And then what's behind that? The things that you and I have talked about for 10 years, Jim. The satanic things behind all of that. Trump must have a window onto it. Now, some of his supporters, they tell me, well, he does, Richie. We think he does. We're going to wait till he gets in, or he's going to wait till he gets in. Now, I know you don't think that, but that's an incredibly naive thing for people to think that Trump would get in somehow and then he would unmask, the great conspiracy. He's not going to do that. Now's the time to name names and to say to people, listen, people, I'd love it if Trump got up there tomorrow, or if Jeremy Corbyn in London got up there tomorrow and said, you know what, people, this is the way it's going, right? People like me, we're puppets. That's all we are. There's a group of banksters above us. Above them are some very, very serious Rothschild Zionist types, and behind them is something so scary you don't even want to think about it. These are the people calling the shots. These are the people who rigged the system. But he's never going to do that, is he?
I kind of doubt it, because number one, he does seem to care about his family. All right. And the people you're talking about, particularly the ones up there that are the scary ones we don't even want to talk about, they'll kill you at the drop of a hat. And not only kill you, they'll kill your whole family and your dog and your neighbor and his dog. OK, they don't care. They don't care about people. All right. Now, number one, I think you're right. I think to a large extent, Trump understands that there's this game going on. OK, but I think he also understands the number one rule of the game, which is don't give away the game. OK, and so I think he's playing it cozy. He's trying to tell people as best he can. It's kind of like Jesus. OK, Jesus didn't tell the people what he really wanted to tell them, because he told his disciples said, Lord, why do you always speak in parables? You tell these little stories, And he said, well, that's because that's just about the most that the masses can understand. OK, and I think Trump understands that, too. But he's trying to tell us, hey, how much more clear can he be when he says our campaign is an existential threat to the establishment? Hello, there you go. He's telling you. He's just not getting into the names and the details because, number one, he likes to live. He wants his family to live. And number two, he understands that most people are not even going to understand what he's talking about. You and I do. Your faithful listeners do. But, hey, we're just a drop in the bucket. Think of everybody outside. They don't know. They don't understand. And unfortunately, so many of them don't want to hear it. They don't want to know that.
What about Mike Pence? And because I've had a few discussions with people like yourself whom, are saying that for the time being, this guy is far better than Hillary. And I've had a few discussions with people like you, Jim, not often not as learned or as experienced as you, but I've had quite a few conversations. And this guy Pence comes up. And looking at Pence, as best as I can tell, this guy is like the Dick Cheney to George Bush. He's like he would be like, I suppose, a version or another not a prototype, but another reality, another Dick Cheney. And this guy is sinister, and his opinions are sinister, and who he hangs around with is sinister. Where he's been and what he does is pretty sinister. And that again, even if Trump were to get in, that those who really pull the strings would play on Trump's narcissism and his love of the limelight and his love of being president. And what you would have is, you would have the Dick Cheney guy in the background, sending the troops into Syria, continuing the relationship with the Saudis, allowing Israel to expand further and further and further. What do you say to that?
I think you're right. In fact, I think that was the worst decision that Trump ever made, picking him as vice president. And I'm sure he was persuaded or leveraged into that by people who, not because Pence obviously is a New World Order stooge. He's going to go along with the same program we've been under for the last 50, 60 years. OK, and what it concerns me, because this puts Trump in the gun sights. OK, because if he gets elected and Pence is there, all they got to do is get rid of Trump, and they got their guy. They got another Hillary, too, in office. OK, and I totally agree with you. He's just another New World Order stooge. And, of course, he's surrounded himself with Giuliani and others that have been there all along. So that's pretty worrisome. But, it would depend on how much fortitude Trump would show. Would he actually be in charge? Because technically, and according to the Constitution, the vice president really doesn't have very much power.
No.
He gets to go around and travel and make campaign stops and stuff, and that's about it. But, how much will Trump put his foot down? And that remains to be seen. And in fact, all of Trump, what he might do, what he might not do, I mean, we really don't know. He's a great big question mark. But hey, I'd rather vote for the question mark than the known evil.
Absolutely. I'm going to read a few tweets, Jim. Jim is going to stay with us for another 15 minutes or thereabouts. Great to have him on the program. Go to jimmars.com. Terrific. Multiple New York Times bestseller. best-selling author, Jim, and a great broadcaster. We miss you on the radio doing your own show, my friend. I know you're busy and you've a lot going on, but I used to love listening to your program. And one of the things we'd love to do in the future is get you on our little... We don't have a radio station, but we have a 24-hour stream here. We'd love to have you do something in the future. Craig Stewart tweets, "Thank God I've been thinking exactly like Jim for the last 2 weeks. I thought I was getting brainwashed," says Craig. Judy Eggleton tweets, "Trump loves Israel, ? Kevin Randolph tweets, "Richie, the answer to your current question happened on Christmas Eve 1912 when the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and others created the Fed." Thanks, Kevin Randolph. Kevin is in New York City, I believe, listening. Chris tweets, "Trump supports and loves the Rothschilds, the Mossad, Israel war criminals." Says a lot right there, says Chris. Hi to Alex Watson. Alex is a long-time listener to the programme, singer-songwriter. She's asking questions about whether Trump really is a misogynist or not. La Antenna, hi La Antenna as well. So many tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter, richie@richieallen.co.uk. Although, again, I'm having trouble accessing my email. Brilliant question coming in from Jean, who's listening to the programme in County Donegal. And it must be Jean, it must be a guy because it's Gene. Jean says, "Was JFK the last truly working for the people politician that existed in the United States?"
Well, yes, basically. Although I think Ronald Reagan had some good thoughts towards the people of the United States, but then he got shot 2 months into his presidency, and George Herbert Walker Bush took over.
Do you we never talked about Reagan getting shot. Who shot Reagan again? It wasn't Hinckley, so it wasn't. Who was it? What was the guy's name? I can never remember.
Well, we don't know who shot Reagan. You may be thinking of the Robert Kennedy assassination. We know who shot him, and it was not Sirhan.
It wasn't Sirhan. No, I was trying to think of the guy who they framed up for the Reagan assassination. I can never think of his surname. Anyway,
well, I don't think they ever caught anybody.
They didn't, Jim. They didn't. You're right. You're right.
Oh, Hinckley, of course.
Hinckley, it was Hinckley. There you go. I thought.
By the way, whose father was a very close friend with George Herbert Walker Bush.
Yeah.
Okay. Who then took over since he was vice president, and through the infamous scandal in Ronald Reagan's regime, the Iran-Contra scandal. Excuse me. What it turns out was the president signing all those documents that participated in that scandal, shipping arms to the Sandinistas in Central America and bringing cocaine back to the United States. That was George Herbert Walker Bush.
Of course it was, right? Yeah.
And so, no, but the problem in the Reagan shooting is that Hinckley didn't shoot him, okay? And according to Jessica Savage, one of the network reporters, she said the shots came from above her on the grassy knoll. And I paid close attention to that.
Of course.
You know me and the connection to the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
So sure enough, I have a photograph taken by the White House photographer that was on the opposite side of Reagan and his entourage. And in the background, you can see the crowd in which Hinckley was standing. And they're parallel. They're right there, even in height, and not a far distance away from Reagan. And then right next to him is this stone wall, and on top of the stone wall is this grassy area, the grassy knoll. And in a balcony with the sliding doors half open, there is obviously a human figure crouching up there. And then if you look at the reports of Reagan's shooting, the bullet entered him at a steep downward trajectory. Well, Hinckley was at parallel with him. Should have entered at if a downward trajectory only
he
slightly.
He was a stooge, was he, Jim?
He was a stooge. He was a brainwashed guy. He was there. Yeah, he fired all the shots. Yeah, he hit the Secret Service guy and the cop, everybody else, but he did not shoot Reagan.
Can I ask you a question, Jim? Can I ask you a question? Is it possible then that when Reagan recovered, I remember vividly when I was in high school reading about it, and one of the Secret Service guys threw himself in the way and took a bullet, apparently. Whether that's true or not, but that's the official version. But could it have been the case if you said that Reagan did have an idea of what was going on and he was thinking of people? Could it have been that when Reagan eventually got home and he went back to the White House, maybe he got a phone call late one night and said, "Ron, that thing that we asked you to do that you didn't want to do, if you don't do it, Ron, next time we won't miss you.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, there's always that. But then how will we know? Because he suddenly developed Alzheimer's. Gee, I can't remember anything.
Can't remember anything.
And, of course, that's easy enough to induce in someone.
Let me ask you this, Jim. We've got the great Jim Marrs on the line, 27 minutes to the top of the hour. Jim is going to stay with me for 10 more minutes. He's a busy man. A lot of requests today. Like John Rappaport, a lot of people want to talk to Jim on the eve of the election. Tell me this, Jim. Look, Hillary's going to win tomorrow. I know you hate me saying that, but she is. It's been decreed. However it happens tomorrow, it's going to happen one way or the other. What's likely to happen in the days afterwards? Do you think there's going to be a lot of unrest?
Maybe and maybe not. If enough people get out there and vote for Trump, it may throw a monkey wrench in the works, because despite all this talk about, she's going to win, in fact, I saw today where Newsweek apparently has already printed up a huge quantity of magazines talking about Madam President. Okay, they are in their mind, they're just sure that she's going to win. But if enough people get out, it's going to be very damn difficult to fudge the vote. In fact, I tell you, I think tomorrow what the actual vote would probably be would be about 80% for Trump, 20% for Hillary, with a few, off a few points because of the Greens and the Libertarians. Okay, but by the time it reaches the people through the control media, it'll be, Hillary 43 and Trump, 46.
41 maybe. Yeah.
40, and the closest they can make it, the easier it is to shift the decimal points in the hacked computer machines and turn the victory to Hillary. Okay, but if 80% of the vote gets out there and they all wear red to show who's voting for who, then the whole thing can be shown up to be a fraudulent vote. And that's why I am not particularly happy with Donald Trump saying that he is not going to say that he's going to yield based on the results of the election, because it's rigged. Okay, because it is. It's been rigged for years. It's been rigged ever since they've put in the computer voting machines. It's been rigged even before that, certainly here in Texas and in many other states. They've gone back, looked in the ballot box and found out that half the people voting for the winner, were actually dead.
We're dead. We're dead and buried.
That's been shown time and time again. So the idea of a fraudulent election and Trump saying it's rigged, that's number one, it's nothing new. And number two, it's absolutely true. Okay, so that's why there whatever happens needs to be unalterable. Okay, but unfortunately, they keep talking. Well, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. She's coming up. No, he's coming up. They got to keep it close so that they can jimmy the results.
I have a feeling something is going to happen. I've become more spiritual as I've gotten older, but I certainly don't have any psychic abilities. But I have a feeling this is going to happen, and you're going to reach across the Atlantic and you're going to punch me in the face when I say this. But this is what I think is going to happen. We know today that there are 100% more Latin Americans registered in places like Florida. Again, this is a setup. This is a setup by the cabal that wants Hillary to win, and it would probably be hundreds of thousands of people not actually registered to vote who will vote in Florida, and she'll carry Florida. Now, this is what I think will happen. You really are going to kill me, Jim. She's going to win the election, and sometime next summer, Donald is going to get the Trade and Industry Secretary job, and then I'm going to fly to Texas, and you're going to buy me a drink. That's what's. I could see that eventuality,
No, I'm not going to punch you in the face. That's entirely possible. That's entirely possible, especially with a fraudulent election. Okay, it's really interesting what's going on, but I'll tell you that regardless of who wins, there's going to be some upset in this country, because I guarantee you, number one, if Trump should win, the radical left, is going to go nuts. You'll see riots in the cities. You'll see all kinds of, broken shop windows, cops shot, the whole 9 yards, because they're a bunch of idiots, okay? And number two, if Hillary wins, you're still going to see some upset, because I know right here in Texas, we have bumper stickers ready to go that says, if Hillary's in, Texas is out.
That's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. There's a lot of people here in Texas that are ready to just kiss it all off. We send hundreds of millions of dollars from Texas to Washington every year in tax revenues, okay? And we get back about probably less than 10%. And there's more and more people in Texas saying, look, why don't we just go back to being a republic and keep all those hundreds of millions of dollars right here in Texas to take care of our people?
Has any state, Jim, ever seriously come close to balloting the people of the state to consider leaving the Union? Has it ever even come close, a ballot?
Well, number one, in the mid-1800s, it got more than close. 13 states did.
Yeah. I'm thinking in more recent times, of course.
That wasn't, by the way, that was not just the governors and the leadership. All of those states, all those southern states that were in the Confederacy, they all held a public vote, and they all voted to leave. And there's been others. I think, as I recall, there's an incident in the Northeast, in Maine perhaps, somewhere, where they voted to leave. Other people have tried to leave, and it just hadn't happened. But see, the difference is that Texas was a republic, and it voluntarily joined the United States. And under the documents that were signed for that, it states two things. Number one, if we decide to leave, we can freaking leave. And number two, if we don't want to leave, but we want to exert ourselves, then Texas could divide into 5 states, which means 5 more senators, 5 extra congressmen, and we'd have enough to dominate the Congress. So it's entirely possible. And even the governor seems open to the idea. And what they're doing now is trying to get it on the ballot. I doubt seriously it's going to get on the ballot this year, but after the turmoil of the next 4 years, regardless of who gets in, I think you'll probably see that we have enough votes here in Texas to get on the ballot and vote whether we want to stay in the Union or not.
It would be fascinating, wouldn't it?
By the way, they're already calling it Texit.
Texit, yeah. As in Brexit, yeah.
Yeah, and speaking of, how's Brexit going?
Well, last week the High Court ruled that the Prime Minister must get Parliament's permission before formally telling the European Union that the UK wants to leave, which is a bit rich because Parliament decided to hold a referendum in the first place.
That's
and the
right.
people voted to leave, And in fact, Jim, while we're talking, we're getting tweets from people saying, Richie, don't be so dismissive of Trump's chances. Look at Brexit. We all thought that they would rig the Brexit vote. And,
that's perfect. That's perfect. That's right. I remember reading even over here. It'll never work. They'll never vote to go out. This isn't going to happen. And, of course, that was propagated by the New World Order that didn't want them to leave. Okay?
Yeah.
But the voice of the people was heard.
And I'm going to find it fascinating if they don't rig the voting system, and if they do leave it up to the people, if they're so arrogant in terms of they think, well, we've done enough now with Hillary, if they're so arrogant and they leave it to the people to vote, which again I don't think will happen, but if they do and Trump gets in, well, it's going to be very interesting over the next 6 months to a year. Our listeners need to get on jimmars.com. Jim's books are brilliant. That goes without saying. Just before we finish, Jim, you are writing at the moment, right?
Yes, I have a new book in. It should be out right now. People read the book I just finished, Shadow of the Illuminati. Okay, I think they would change their voting habits for this election, but they're not going to get to read it until late spring. So by then it'll be old news. That's the problem with the publishing field. If this was a newspaper, I'd write it in the morning and you'd read it in the afternoon. But no, book publishing, you got to wait a year before you can read anything, but then it's old news.
It'll never be old news, Jim. It'll always be relevant, my friend.
Well, that's true. That's true. There's a lot of history and tie-ins here. For example, the communists had changed their name from the League of the Just and the League of the Just was formed by the Illuminati. It's all the same bunch, and they're still trying to run us today.
Same story, but different characters, eh?
Yeah.
Always. Jim, look after yourself. Thanks again for doing this today. I really appreciate it. You know we love you here in the UK. Interesting couple of days ahead for you. I'll be watching out for what you're saying on social media, and I'll keep an eye on jimmars.com. Look after yourself, my friend. Thanks again.
Thank you, Richie. Adios.
Bye for now. The great Jim Marrs live on the line from Boyd in Texas.